G'day ladies and gentlemen, Duckville here. Welcome to our StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm replay cast here. It is going to be on King's Sejong Station, up at the top left hand side as our Red Protoss player here. He is a really interesting player to watch. I have been watching quite a lot of him on his stream from over in the United States. It is Ninja. And he will be one of our combatants here today on this interesting 1 versus 1 map. Down at the bottom right hand side as our blue Terran player here. Not too much information about this little player over here, but it is our blue Terran Sinder. And we'll see what these guys get up to, because I do know how our Protoss is going to open this one up. I have done a cast of him before. It is our cannon rushing expert here, one of the very few who cannon rush all the way up to Masters and Grandmasters even. Mr. Ninja is all the way up to Grandmasters, and is not only just a good cannon rushing player, but also a good macro player as well. If you were to play out a normal game from time to time when he's streaming, he also just does normal games as well. But the cannon rushes are the fun things that I like to see, and I think we are going to get that right here, right now, as our forge starts up. We're going to get the first probe heading straight across here. He's going to, in fact, just get it straight in there. Now, part of the reason this probe comes out so early is that you want to get there before the wall completes. So that's why we have Ninja heading straight across. And he's going to just slap down that pylon straight away. Wants to be able to get some pylon power on the high ground here. Now, you may be wondering, why isn't he, like, trying to do some fancy stuff with the, you know, blocking off the mineral line or something like that? Against a Terran that's nowhere near efficient, because they can just lift and move away. But also when you're dealing with a that kind of cannon rush, you actually have to kill your opponent because you're investing like 4 pylons in it there. So anyway, he's as we can see, just building a little bit of cannon action here on the low ground as well as the high ground. It looks as if this pylon is not going to complete in time. Unfortunately for Ninja, he was not able to get a proper coverage on this area here. As you can see, you can kind of wall that off and stop the probes, the SCVs, from being able to track it down and kill off the cannon. But unfortunately, Ninja was not able to get out of there. But all this time, Sinder, of course, is losing a lot of his mining time. I don't think there's any need for him to have all of these SCVs over here. He just needs to have a few that are beating down on the pylon. But Ninja, well, it looks as if he is, well, he's going to establish some semblance of a position here, but at what cost? I mean, he's about to lose this probe, I think. If the Marines can keep an eye on that, I kind of feel like keeping one of the Marines on the probes is a good idea here. But he's going to try and make sure that he can get those cannons up and running. Ooh, no cancel for Ninja. That kind of hurts him a little bit. But the probe does go down. We have another probe that's over here as well. It looks as if Ninja wants to try and get another cannon up, but I don't think that's going to happen because just the positioning here doesn't really help out too well. So Ninja, well, the cannon rush has been stopped for the moment. We'll see if he's going to be able to follow this up somehow. Probe is just heading down towards the natural. This probe inside the main base is just hanging out to the side. Are we going to get these Marines shooting it down? It looks like we will. Down goes the probe, and that pretty much, as we said, puts an end to this particular cannon rush. Now, as a Terran player, we can see that Sinder is building a bunker here, and he's even finishing it off. I mean, I don't think he had to build that there, but it was good that he did, just as a safety precaution. You never know when a Protoss is going to continually try and send in those probes to follow up on what's going on. And with some good timing there, Sinder scouts out what's happening over at the other side of the map. A Nexus has gone down, a cannon for some protection, and it looks as if things are going to transfer out back into a much more standardized kind of game here from Ninja, with his gas coming up, gateway completing. So at this point, we want to, of course, take a look at you know, what the situation is for these two players. We can see that 2 workers have been killed off by Sinder, of course, being those pesky probes that were setting up pylons and cannons all over the other side of the map. But other than that, what has Sinder been able to do? Well, his SCVs, as we mentioned, lost a lot of mining time. There is a huge amount of mining time that isn't represented here on this tab, and it also doesn't factor in that our tech is quite late. We've got the second command center now coming up. The factory has finally completed, and it looks like he might even build a tank or two before he expands down to the low ground. So he's going to play this very safe, as we can see here. First tank, I suppose actually the first tank is to get rid of the cannons. That's what they're there for. Yeah, Sinder just going to try and catch up with what he would normally be at right now. Of course, normally you would have a starport by this point and be preparing for either, you know, some medevacs or perhaps a Banshee or something like that, just to make sure that you do have your options open. Whereas the Protoss, you probably would be getting close to your warp gate tech at this point. We can see that Ninja's going to follow up with a robo to make sure he has some detection. And other than that, I mean, things are just going to macro out from this point. And we've got Mothership Core coming along. Probe's just having a look there, wanting to see what's at the front door. It looks as if that tank has finally been set up, and the tank will be able to shell away at the cannon, taking that down in due time. And the worker count looking good for Ninja, sitting up there at 34 probes out on the map to his opponent's 24. So we would like to see Sinder expanding pretty quickly here. I'm not sure why he hasn't lifted down to the low ground just yet. He might be just a little bit worried about possible warp-ins coming in at this point. Like you will remember I said warp gate tech would probably be done by now, but obviously with the delay on the gateway and the cybernetics core, that means that there was no warp gate tech just yet, so he probably could have headed down to the expansion, but better to be safe than sorry, as they say. So Sinder's going to have a couple of tanks out. We've got a second factory on the way, which is quite interesting. A starport being built up as well. And Sinder is going to have that third command center. I wonder if he's going to be expanding straight away, or if he's just going to be building that up just to make sure his SCV count continues to grow. But our Protoss has been able to get out some robo units here. We have an Immortal that has marched its way out into the natural. And the first of the observers is now just coming through as well. So I would assume that Ninja is going to prepare some defensive forces now. You do need to be, even if you do slow down a Terran by killing off, or at least occupying their time dealing with the with those SCVs and jumping off the mineral line and trying to deal with the pylons and things, you still do need to be careful about follow-up pushes. Some Terran players, once they've been cannon rushed, thinking that the Protoss is a little bit I guess lax back at home, not as much available for them to defend with. They may try and push out with a one base, you know, push consisting of Banshees and tanks and Marines, so the old 1-1-1 kind of style that used to be quite popular in TvP. But it looks as if we're not going to get anything of the sort here. Sinder's happy, as we said, just to play a nice, patient game, getting his economy back into a much more stable position. He's sitting at 40 SCVs right now. We can see an armory is also going down, so I think we're going to get some mech out of our blue Terran here, which is pretty cool. Not often you get to see mech, especially these days, as you know, it's just gotten quite frustrating to deal with Protoss with all the various tools that they have available to them. As many people will know, I kind of play random, so I do get a little bit of both sides of the coin, and I do like to play some mech TvP when I can, but it's very difficult. Not to say it's impossible. A lot of people will say it's impossible, it's the worst strategy ever, but it's just very hard. Is the issue with mech. It's very difficult to pull off properly. It requires a lot of tactical positioning, a lot of huge amounts of scouting so that you know exactly what the Protoss is doing, and particularly like the positional kind of plays that I was talking about. You have to be very good with your positioning, because you don't want to be caught out out of position with tanks in the wrong spot, or if you get up to BC Raven Viking, if you get caught out and your BCs die or something like that, you have to be very careful about that kind of stuff. And it definitely is going to be mech, confirmed by the third and the fourth factory. The armory picking up +1 on the vehicle and ship weapons. And I do like that Ninja, he's scouted this, I believe. You know, he's at least seen the large amount of tanks at the front, and has taken his third. We may even see him get a fourth base quickly, which would be quite nice. But I would like to see him pick up charge as soon as he can. It's quite a handy tool when you're dealing with mech. And as we can see, Still continuing to pump out the Immortals every now and then. +1 to weapons on the way. Our Templar Archives is done. A few more gateways are just flowering open. And our Protoss player is going to be pretty comfortable, I feel. He's things are progressing quite nicely for him at this point. Ninja has the option of pushing, but it looks as if Sinder is going to play a very passive, a very turtley kind of game. And, you know, this kind of isn't too bad for him, I guess you could say. It's nice to have a wall of tanks and some mines at the front to try and deal with any incoming enemy forces, but you just, as we said, you have to be very careful with your positioning. You've got to make sure that everything is done correctly, as an observer just dies off there. But one interesting addition, which I'm going to be definitely keeping an eye on here, are these Widow Mines. We've got quite a lot of these guys now popping out from Sinder. Now, Widow Mines, of course, just recently buffed a bit. They gained a little bit more AoE damage, I believe it was, technically, when you work it out. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was pretty interesting to see them change that back. It's much more like they used to be, so it could be quite interesting to see what happens with that. But mech, as we were talking about before, very difficult to execute. The main things you want to do with mech, if you're going to play a turtley kind of style, is you want to set up a nice zone of protection. As you can see here, this is that zone where Sinder has set up his line, basically, you know, like a demilitarized zone where nothing is going to get through there. He's got to make sure he's got a lot of tanks and some Widow Mines. Another thing you need to do are these turrets just outside the edges to make sure War Prisms can't get in and get to do any pesky stuff like that. And always be cranking out your upgrades. You have to keep on top of those upgrades when you're playing mech. It's alarming how much you know, a Protoss who has to deal with like 1-1 tanks and you know, Vikings and stuff, it's alarming how different the fights can be when you have like 3-3. If you're able to crank out your 3-3 as quickly as possible, then that could put you in a really good position. But Sinder is actually, it looks as if we're going to see him go for just straight up to Skytech pretty quickly here. So we're going to crank out a lot of Banshees, I would assume. I don't think he's going to go Ravens because he doesn't really have the gas for it. He doesn't even have the gas income to build up the Raven Force or anything like that. Now, you do want to get to Ravens at a certain point when you're playing as mech, even against Protoss, but it can be quite tough. And I love what Ninja's doing here. We're sticking with a very a mobile force of Zealots, and then, of course, we've thrown in quite a lot of Immortals. That's 7 Immortals, which is a damn fine amount of Immortals. We've also got the Templar here for some feedback, and Storm is needed, and he's expanding to the 4th base. So the thing about this matchup, when the Terran plays mech, is that it really sort of morphs the way you play. As a Terran player, you actually want to play a lot more like a Protoss. You have very powerful forces in these tanks, in the Widow Mines and Banshees and things like that, but they're very slow. They're very tough to get out in large numbers very quickly, and they are also something that you have to be, if you position correctly, you can do really well. If you misposition, then you can be in a lot of trouble, which is the same way, generally speaking, that Protoss tends to work when you're playing that. However, when you're playing Protoss and the Terran is going mech, you kind of have to play a little bit more like a Zerg. You want to be expanding really quickly, setting up a lot of static defense so that Hellions and Hellbats can't get any damage done, and you kind of just want to be making sure that your economy is in a really good position, because you probably will need to resupply very quickly, because the tanks are going to shred up the Zealots and things like that, and anything on the ground, so you have to be able to resupply really quickly. You want lots of gateways back home, as we can see here. Fleet Beacon is also going down. I was going to get to that in just a minute. Stargates and Fleet Beacon is on the run here for Ninja, which I really like, but we'll talk about that in a second. This is Command Center. Where is he going? Is he going over here or something like that? I'm not too sure, but a storm gets thrown down just in case we get some weather disruptions in that Command Center while it's flying away. But as I said, you want to be able to get your expansions up nicely and have a good income, because you will need to resupply generally quite a lot, because Zealots tank a lot of fire, and they will die very quickly. If Ghosts come out, they can smash down the Immortals very quickly with a few well-placed EMPs. and as I said, it's very similar in a way to playing like a Zerg, getting a lot of expansions up and then just constantly resupplying and trying to batter down this Terran force here is pretty much the name of the game for mid-game Protoss, or early and mid-game Protoss when you're playing against the mech Terran player. Then one of the big things you want to look towards are these guys here, these 5 Stargates. You want to be building up your carrier force. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the carrier force needs to be up and running because carriers are the best way to deal with mech. They provide such a high power attack force in the interceptors that come out. When you get a lot of good upgrades, they are very, very tough to stop. And the more important thing is, it's kind of difficult for a Terran player to be able to counter them unless you've got a lot of these guys, which is actually one thing that I'm really interested about with this match, is I haven't seen the new Widow Mines against Airtos at any point. But anyway, carriers normally what a lot of Protoss players will do is they will set up a lot of Tempests and Void Rays and that kind of stuff. But Tempest shots can be blocked by point defense drones, so that's one worrying thing about going towards the Tempest tech and massing up on it. Whereas carriers cannot be blocked. You can try and Hunter Seeker them down, but it's not the most efficient way to do things. And now, as we can see, this is going to become a really interesting fight here because our Terran player has so many Widow Mines. There are 20 Widow Mines out of the map right now. He's got a huge amount of tanks here as well. And as Sinder sees his command center burn down, he is going to have to be very careful with pushing out into this position, as the Widow Mines are constantly threatening to fire a couple of shots or two, almost taking out that Archon there. But a Storm goes down, nice. And another one. Trying to clean out some of these Widow Mines here. It looks as if Ninja is just sort of unsure of what to do, but he does have one carrier on the way. I want to see some more upgrades coming out of these Cyber Cores as well. But he's got the tech prepared, and a couple more carriers are also being built up right now. And it looks as if Sinder is going to have to deal with all of these Zealots now just charging forwards. They don't care. They've got 112 on their upgrades, and they're going to soak up a lot of the damage there. Getting annihilated by the Widow Mines. Wow, that was really interesting to see how that worked out. But this force here of Sinder is very, very strong. As we said, it's very powerful once it's in position and once it's set up. But until it does that, it is quite exposed. But we'll see how he's going to go about this, because the carriers are being chrono boosted out as quickly as possible. The upgrade's still a little bit behind there. You really do want to get your air armor upgrades up and running, if possible, because they really help out in dealing with Vikings in particular, because the the Vikings, they do 2 attacks, and so if you have more armor and more shields as well, I guess, if you wanted to, but in particular the armor is quite helpful in these kinds of situations, because these big bad boys, the carriers, are extremely tanky. They've got 150 shields, 300 health, so armor is really helpful with them. And of course, with that, with the huge amount of DPS that they put out, they are a really good way of dealing with mech. And as you can see, so that's 6 damage per interceptors with 2 attacks. So it's a lot of damage that they put out. I'm pretty sure they're still the highest DPS in the game. If someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not 100% sure. Looks as if Sinder's going to move out. He's trying to scan out what's happening here. He has found a base in the middle that Ninja has set up, and Ninja perhaps preparing for a flank. As we can see, he may be able to come in here and just jump straight on top of these forces. The tanks are now in a little bit of an interesting position. They're kind of exposed here in the middle of the map. We'll see what's going to happen, because the carriers are now on their way across to deal with this imminent threat. And the tanks, I mean, they do a lot of damage. They take out the Nexus, but how many are going to survive? That's just 5 carriers. Imagine another 4 or 5 more that are now on the way, and once we get to that critical mass of carriers, they just tear apart everything in a mech army. We can see now that Sinder's forced to back off. A lot of these Widow Mines are in position here, ready to go, but it looks as if they will get a couple of storms thrown down on top of them. The observer's in position to see what they're doing, but I think that is going to be it. Some more beautiful storms from Ninja. Wonderful play from him. I've loved how he's transitioned here to deal with mech. Of course, the Terran players sitting here are going to be saying, well, that's why you don't go mech, but this is why you have to be very careful with your positioning there. Just a small mistake saw Sinder fall down as he lost all of his tanks in the middle of the map, and then the carriers took the cake from there. So hope you all enjoyed that game, and I'll catch you all next time.